should have asked it.
Well, I'm asking it now.
So what? And it was basically one of my moment. Like, what was my moment?
You came up with the question, so.
I mean,
so what was the question? It was like, what were your feelings at the time?
Explosion.
Okay, welcome to Buds with Suds with Richard Zombeck and Steve Lesnikoski.
Here I am.
There he is. We're trying a couple new things on this particular episode. One, we're in a whole different room that we're not exactly used to, so we're going to see how that sounds. And also, we've decided after much conversation and back and forth texting that in some cases we're going to leave the beeps out, which means there are going to be some swears. So if you have small children or elderly grandparents that are offended by swearing, I don't think we're going to overdo it. But if an occasional one slips in there, I think we're going to leave it in, and we'll just rate
Put a pair of headphones in.
We'll rate the podcast appropriately.
Truly.
So in the last episode, if you can call it that, Steve interviewed me. It was more like me talking nonstop for 30 minutes straight, which I can generally do standing on my head. And I'm going to try not to this time because this show's all about Steve. And so you guys get to know him. I don't even know how old you are.
I just turned 34.
So Steve is a 34-year-old guy from California. He and I work together. That would be a good opportunity to give the disclaimer, just to let you know that none of the opinions that we express on this podcast are opinions of the places for which we work or the organizations for which we work or anyone else. They're our own. That's it. This is our thing. Alone. Just us. And anyone else who subsequently comes on. So, Steve.
Yeah.
I guess you need a couple prompts, do you?
I mean,
well, let's start at the beginning, right? Not from DNA on up, but let's
the beginning.
Start at the beginning. What brought you here?
Well, that's more like the end. So that would be the end of this crazy, insane journey. So I guess I could characterize it as childhood, a whole bunch of time trying to escape reality, doing a lot of drugs, making a decision to fly across the country, 3,200 miles away from where I lived, and then land. And that's like the end. And then from that time on, it's been, change and purpose and happiness and all the things that come with stability, I suppose, somewhat stability. So, I mean, in the beginning, I would characterize my upbringing as normal in the sense of like what Americans' family looks like, what the American family looks like.
Nuclear family, American dream.
Yeah, man, like white picket fence, father and mother are still married. My father works in the tech industry. He's always been out there.
So middle class.
Yeah, middle class. Back when there was an upper middle class, I guess you could say there was upper middle class, So I grew up in San Jose, California, which is the tech capital.
Quintessential tech capital.
Of the Bay Area. And I mean, San Francisco at the time wasn't as big, but, so I grew up there in the late 80s, through 90s, 2000s. And, I would be lying if I said life was challenging. It really wasn't. Like back then when you're a kid, you think life is such a struggle and such a challenge, but really comparatively to the rest of the world, it wasn't that difficult. there weren't a lot of expectations put onto me that I can remember. Maybe I've blocked that out, but it was basically you go to school, you do your homework, you play some sports, and that was it. And I don't really remember many lessons from my parents taught to me. I learned a lot of that from my grandparents on my mother's side. And my grandfather was a World War II pilot who flew, 23 missions from Africa, Italy. He did like 3 times the amount that people did, right? And with his squadron, he would he wouldn't talk about specifics, but he would always say one thing that, when we would wake up in the morning, it was basically, you're going to get shot at, so try not to die. Right. So, I learned
an interesting life lesson.
Yeah. Like I learned really quick.
This is an American Army or?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know with a name like Lesnikoski. You could have.
Well,
it's not like you were flying for the Luftwaffe.
Well, it's on my mother's side. Yeah. So, I don't know where I was going with that. But anyway, so my grandfather was, a really positive influence on me. And my grandmother, who was a kindergarten teacher for like 45 years. And she like worked till she was 68. And it was just like the nicest, crazy, like always would have like baked goods when you come over there, really always just happy-go-lucky person. So, I gravitated to going up there a lot. But I would say for me, if we're gonna focus on like what happened to me, I can't say that I was a victim of like my family sucked or like I came from poverty or like any other external factor, right? Like I can't use it because it's not the truth.
I wonder sometimes if and I don't mean this to sound insensitive, but I often wonder if anyone can.
Yeah, I think there are absolutely cases. I've cases of being born into sex trafficking, just these horrific environments that you had no choice to be a part of. I would absolutely say, yeah, shoot up some heroin. I get it.
You raise a good point. Like I said, I didn't mean to be insensitive.
Well,
but no, I agree with you in those terms. But okay. I think I was more referring to, is growing up poor a good enough reason? I think what I'm getting at is basically probably a longer conversation than about you, and we'll leave it for another show.
Yeah.
But what exactly is addiction and
many components to that.
And what is that? What is that? So we'll leave that for another show.
Absolutely.
Sorry to have interrupted.
It happens.
It's going to happen a lot.
I expect it at this point. I'm just riding coattails around here. So yeah, I would say, and I've thought about this, not at great length because I don't reflect on this deeply, but for me, it was around 1994, 95. And I remember my father brought home a computer, and I don't know if it happened the day that he brought it home, but there was a conversation at some point where he basically was like, you need to learn this thing. This is going to be the future. Everything is going to be done on this computer. So learn it. And that's what I did. And I started just diving deep into computers, and, this was before internet was mainstream, I think. I mean, we had an old Apple ISP called eWorld that was on this computer. It was like an old Apple, I don't even remember it, but it was like a long gray box. It was just ugly. It was before iMacs. So I really gravitated to these things that just detached me from the reality around me, like video games, TV, playing on the internet, like just finding anything to get out of myself. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was really uncomfortable in situations where I had to be present and I had to be front and center.
What kind of TV did you watch?
Oh man, Nick at Night. Are You Afraid of the Dark? Like this, a lot of Nickelodeon stuff.
Yeah.
Seinfeld. We watched a lot of Seinfeld, like those mid '90s sitcoms.
Another show about nothing, like this one.
Right. Exactly. I would sneak in Married with Children every once in a while. That was a no-go with my parents. But yeah, like just mainstream stuff that was on the television at the time. A lot of Beavis and Butthead, MTV stuff when they were starting to do those.
So nothing
cartoons.
in particular, particularly escapist.
Right.
Just
right.
anything.
I wasn't like a protege child that was
Right.
studying
anything
like,
to get you out of your head,
yeah,
basically. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we'll fast forward a little bit until high school, and high school comes around, and there were some things that happened. Essentially, I was supposed to be on this path of like good Catholic schools, and then you go to a Catholic high school, and so on and so forth, and you become a productive member of society. But that wasn't the case.
Catholic high school, huh?
Yeah,
that begins to explain a rash of different things.
So I went to the school that I originally went to for kindergarten through 8 had like 35 kids in each grade. So I pretty much grew up with 35 kids, and if that's your bubble, then there's a wide world out there. So when I went to the local public school that was near me, there was
600 kids per class.
No, it's more than that.
Per class?
Yeah, like each grade I think had close to 800.
Wow.
There was a lot of kids in that school. Maybe it was less, but it seemed like a college campus. It was huge. And for like the first time I got to see different socioeconomic classes and different culture and just all these things I hadn't really experienced before, and I was just overwhelmed, and I was scared. I didn't know what to do. So naturally, I retreated back to what I knew, which was like come home right after school and just hide. And eventually that changed, and I became active because my mother saw that I was isolating so much, and I became active in sports, and I really gravitated to football. And then I started hanging out with the kids that I played football with, and
you're a pretty big guy too.
Yeah, I was somewhat athletic. I was okay, wasn't great, but naturally with that comes introduction to drugs. I started smoking weed really young. I'd say 15. Well, not young now, but back then it seemed young. But and then quickly moved into cocaine like my junior year of high school, keggers and coke, and then around my senior year, this like mesh of kids that went to public school and my friends that I'd still talk to that were all in private school and whose parents were tech people and CEOs and just really wealthy, and like then they started hanging out and we all started hanging out. It was like just weird mix. But the thing that I really noticed is that they had all the money and all my friends at the public school had the better drugs. So naturally I became a middleman for all of that. And, I started doing that, and I gravitated to that, and I took a liking to this pushing people where to go, telling them what to do. And around that time, my senior year, which would be 2003, I hurt myself. I hurt myself pretty bad. I hurt my ankle. And I was prescribed Vicodin. Now, I don't really think I had any introduction to pain pills before that.
So what were you using before? Mostly booze and cocaine?
Booze, coke, smoke some meth here and there.
Good stuff.
Yeah, a lot of weed. Mushrooms like twice. I don't know. I didn't really gravitate toward that. But yeah, it was more weed, coke, booze, and when the pain, like the Vicodin helped, and I kept taking it, and I took it as prescribed because I needed it for a legit reason. But when I stopped taking that is when I noticed myself, it was the middle of, I want to say it was like late springtime and maybe early summer. And now, granted, in California, there's always just mild, right? So I don't really remember anything else other than the time of year. But I remember being sick, and I was like, didn't know what was going on, and it didn't really seem like it was an appropriate time to be sick. So I just fought through it for 3 days, 3 or 4 days. I remember I was just out. And then that was like, that was like my senior year, right before I was about to graduate.
So withdrawals.
Yeah, so it was withdrawals, but I didn't know what it was at the time.
Let me go back just to an earlier statement. You said that it helped. Were you referring to your physical pain, or did it also help you?
No, it helped with the physical pain, and it helped with this, the impending sense of doom that I always had went down a little bit. So
it helped you emotionally also.
Right. So I graduated high school, ended up not really doing anything that summer, made some money. I was working at like a grocery store or something, and a couple of my friends, they were all going to Arizona State, and one of my buddies' parents ended up buying a house out in Tempe so they could, as an investment property, so everybody could, pay rent to them and hang out. Right. So I ended up moving out to Arizona, and that's just when it just exploded. So Tempe was it maybe 2 hours away from Mexico, maybe a little bit more. And I mean, it was crazy. It was just like an explosion. It happened really, really quick. So I went from kind of dabbling in drugs to within like 2 weeks, my roommate's selling OxyContin 80 milligram pills. I'm doing that. And it really happened like that. Right. And I found myself like 6 months into living there, just completely strung out on oxys. And that was like my first experience with Suboxone. This was late 2003, and a buddy of mine went to a dermatologist at the time, right? Probably is still doing this, but so there was this dermatologist, and you basically went in there, you paid cash, and he gave you a prescription for the old stop sign, not the strips, but the little pills. They were 8 milligram pills, and I had like 4 of those a day, maybe three or 4 a day. And so I would take those, and there wasn't really any follow up, and I ended up selling them to.
What did it do for you?
It didn't do anything, because I wasn't doing it as prescribed, right? So I would like take it, I would use it so I wouldn't get sick. I didn't actually want to quit.
Oh, okay.
So I bridged.
What, when you were running out, or when you couldn't find
when I was running out and I couldn't find
then you do the subs.
I do the subs, and that was kind of crazy because like the kid that was selling them all was telling me about like, listen, this is going to help you when you don't have any. He's like giving me a lot of knowledge about how to avoid sickness, and I was just looking back on it like, it's crazy.
What's he doing now? He's probably running some recovery program.
No, I think the last time he's on my LinkedIn, the last time I checked, he is a property or developer of some sort in the Bay Area.
Oh, so probably still doing tons of cocaine.
Probably. Right. God bless him. But so so after that, I come back to California. I'm living in the basement again, and I just.
Is that at your parents'?
Yeah, I'm at my parents' house again. This is like 2004, and I don't really have much purpose or desire. So naturally, I'm just wandering around, the Bay Area. And if you think of the Bay Area, San Jose's at like the bottom, San Francisco's at the top of it. There's Oakland to the east. And then it's basically a big circle, and that's what I would do. I would go up the peninsula up to San Francisco, hang out with friends and whatever up there, and then I'd bounce over the Bay Bridge to Oakland, and come back, and that was my existence for some time, and that caught up to me, and I would say the end of 2004, I don't know, maybe early 2005. I somehow got a job through a friend with a old respected tech company. I won't say which one, but I was paid an absurd amount of money, well more than I deserved, to basically just apply patches to servers all over the world and make sure that there was no hacking attempts. And yeah, that was my job.
So like that show, is it Silicon Valley or the nerdy show?
Yeah, it's kind of.
Yeah, where they put him on the roof and let him retire.
Yeah, rest and vest. Yeah. Yeah, that's that. And then the great thing about that show is it's mostly all true.
Yeah,
the satire is great. But yeah, that was I was hired to apply patches to servers that were in Hong Kong and India and Southeastern Asia, and so obviously that afforded me the ability to do drugs. Right, so I'm
good ones.
Yeah, it was good. They were good drugs. So by this time, I've moved on to heroin, black tar heroin, and so I'm doing that.
Oh, so you were using the real stuff?
Yeah. I ended up meeting a guy, and I'll quickly tell that because it's really hard for me to linearly
I get that.
Put things together. But around that time, I met a guy that was a pizza delivery man, right? And he came to my door. He delivered me a pizza, and he had that look in his eye, and I knew something was going on. He was either coming down.
He was carrying.
He had something. Yeah. He was either dope sick.
Oh, okay.
No, he was dope sick, okay. Or he, was like coming off a meth run or something. And so I basically was like, dude, what's up? He's like, what do you mean? And I basically was like, listen, like, I got money. This is what I want to do. Can you help me out? And he's like, yeah. And I ended up meeting up with these super chill Persian dudes that were smoking opium. And I figured, like, I didn't know, like, the difference at the time between, like, opium, black tar, blah, blah, blah. But they would buy black tar and they'd smoke it, So I ended up, like, getting deep into this world of black tar, Bay Area black tar heroin. It was weird. So I had like a dealer and blah, 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 and all that. So I would try and like arrange my life to be as such that I would never be sick, and I was not paying any rent and I wasn't paying anything else. So every single available dollar could go to drugs. And that went on for some time, and eventually I lost that job. So
as a result of your...
I wonder if I should tell that story or not. I probably shouldn't. So I was essentially, I'll tone it down. I was essentially caught at work, but for some reason I started reading up on HR laws, the American with Disabilities Act, and I knew that if I went to them, because I wasn't caught by a superior, I was caught by another coworker. But if I went to them first and said that I had a problem, that they couldn't fire me.
Right.
Couldn't do it. So I went there. I went to my boss and I said, I have a gambling problem. I need help. And he basically told me to call EAP. I called EAP. There was absolutely no resources. They told me to go to Gambling Anonymous, and I'm like, I'm not fucking doing that because I'm a fraud. I wouldn't want to do that. But they said, you do have behavioral health insurance. If you would like to go to one of the upstanding treatment centers in your area, there's a list of treatment centers, call around and see what's available. So I ended up doing that. And so I had it already. But yeah, I ended up going to rehab, not getting fired. I ended up getting disability, and, they paid me while I was there. And I was I didn't want to quit. I just didn't want to get caught anymore. So I was so arrogant about all this, and just like looking back on it, it's just really gross the way I acted, thinking about it. So I started going to treatment late 2005, and it was just a downhill trajectory from there, way down. I ended up starting to go to AA meetings, and there's a lot of them in San Jose in the South Bay. But I found myself on a Friday night going to a place called Saturday Night Live. And Saturday Night Live was started because there was nowhere else for like young people to go. So they just called it Saturday Night Live. There was meetings all the time, but the cool thing was they had a 12 midnight meeting. All right, so I went to this midnight meeting. There's some good stuff that happened after midnight. Most of the time it was nonsense. But I'll never forget what sort of sold me on the idea that this could work was there was a guy, I believe his name was Tom H. I'm not sure if he's still around. I haven't heard anything, but he was in a dress. He had long hair and like those like really small John Lennon-esque glasses, black fingernails, and he had his hands on this podium. And I'll never forget, and he said, "My name is Tom. I'm an alcoholic. Charles Manson is my sponsor, and Satan is my higher power." And I'm like, whoa, okay. And I didn't know it then, but the seed was planted that maybe my conception and belief system and ideas about spirituality.
So the irony was that was actually your come to Jesus moment.
Yeah, I guess in a sense, yeah. So that like started this whole process, and I slipped a lot, and I struggled a lot, and I ended up getting arrested, and I started that whole process and going to jail and washing up in either a detox or a homeless shelter or somebody's couch or, you know, whatever. And, you know.
So how long ago was that when you saw that guy?
That was a long time ago. That was probably, 14 years ago now. And I would see him here and there, and, you know, his growth as a person changed too. But yeah, that first meeting probably, about 14 years ago.
So just to fill in a couple blanks. So how much, you said you went to jail. How much time did you do in jail? Was this like just little county jails, or was this?
Yeah. So I would do county jail, and then, you know, one time I had to go to state prison for 90 days because I was so bad in county jail that they shipped me up there, and it's called a 90-day turnaround. But so I did, I think altogether maybe 3 years total.
Really?
Like broken up over time. Like the longest time was like a 9 months.
Wow.
Pretty much from like 24, 25 to 30 was that, you know, that whole time that I was just caught in this endless rat.
Okay. And how many detoxes do you think?
Like trips to detox or different facilities?
Trips
was probably 52.
Really?
Easily. Because I would go and then I would leave.
Yeah.
And the way that it worked throughout the county, because I lost my insurance eventually, right? I wasn't getting jobs that were paying for, you know, healthcare like that. And this is before Obamacare. So, you know, it was like a Hunger Games style, right? So you'd call the one detox center, and to give it an idea, so San Jose is in the middle of Santa Clara County, and out there it's all county and state government, right? So the county has its resources allocated for detox. Now for men, county beds for the whole county, which San Jose alone, there's 1 million people. There was 10 beds, 10 or 12 beds, maybe less. So you basically would have to call. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning. You say, "Hey, you know, are there any beds available?" Nope. Call back in 2 hours. So you repeat that process.
That's fun.
And yeah, so I would go, I'd get in, and it sucked, and, you know, I would leave. I would leave, and then, you know, eventually I figured out, you know, they'll give you methadone if you get on the clinic, because you can only get onto the clinic if you either pay or you get a referral through the detox. So I did that. So I, you know, got into the methadone culture, all that brings, and, you know, I washed up from that, and I ended up detoxing from that in jail, which was hell. But
my understanding is that I had a friend that actually used to detox his girlfriend from methadone using heroin, because detoxing from methadone is actually worse. Yeah,
it was pretty bad. I don't know why. You know, I've heard like, it seeps into your bones, but I've never been actually able to verify that. But I think it has to do with the long half-life, but it was bad. It was hell. So,
Steve, I mean, what's interesting about that is that it sounds like somewhere you wanted to stop. I mean, you wanted to get sober. If you're going in and out of detoxes 50 over times, and then
I wanted
trying methadone and ended up in jail and detoxing in jail and stuff. I mean, this isn't something that you were pushed into or
most of the time I
convinced
wasn't.
into. This is something you wanted. Well, I mean, I think it's important because I think, we deal with a lot of people, not the people that are referred to us, but we deal with a lot of people who have this assumption that a lot of people that are using or that are drinking, are either don't know any better or, don't want to get clean. I think one of the things that's important to get across, particularly with this podcast, is how mentally, emotionally, and physically difficult it is.
Yeah.
Even if you want to.
Yeah.
Right. That it's not just a question of sucking it up and,
Right. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about why people use, first of all, right? Like at the beginning of this, I said, yeah, I jumped into it, but after a lot of searching, maybe I should save this for later, but I mean, I realized that I had a lot of emotional and mental anguish that I never resolved, and the drug use was a result of me self-medicating because shit works. I mean, heroin works, right? It's just not sustainable because you either die, you run out of money, or something else happens. But it helps, and it worked, and I didn't think about everything, and all my focus, my life had become so small. I was just focused on money, drugs, not sick. Money, drugs, not sick. Repeat. That was it. Simple. Well, not simple, but
basic.
The process was pretty basic, right? Like I had, anyways. So yeah. I mean, essentially, I wanted to stop, but I lacked I don't want to say resources. I lacked the follow through on my part to continue on because a lot of things were set up for me and a lot of opportunities were taken, right, by me. I just never followed through with them after, I don't know, treatment. Right?
Why do you think that was?
Well, I think it evolved over time. I mean, part of me, I didn't want to stop in the beginning. And I think the other part of it was fear. And quite frankly, I had some arrogance and entitlement about myself that I thought that I was better than what was being offered to me. I think that there's a combination of all of that. But I got to the point where the treatments, the county, I burned through everything in the county. I had started going to other counties to try to get treatment, couldn't get in there. And I got to the point where I was just, I was so broken. I was so hopeless. I was sleeping on the couch of a very dear friend of mine. And her husband was just like looking at me like, what is going on? And yeah, I mean, I was done. Like I was broken. But I didn't know what to do. So I ended up seeing this article that somebody had posted on Reddit, about the Gloucester Police Initiative and what they were doing. And I remember I was sick and I was just doing what I always did, scroll through Reddit. And I happened to be subscribed to r/opiates recovery. And this thing popped up, and I read it, and I said, that's interesting. A police department is offering a pathway into treatment for people. That's strange. And didn't really put too much thought into it. Ended up getting high that day, and I called. I ended up calling the Gloucester Police Department, and I asked them, what was going on, and whoever answered the phone told me, and I asked if, somebody out of state could come in, and they said, sure, just get here.
You were in California at the time?
I was.
Holy cow.
I was in California at the time. So I ended up messaging the person that posted that as a Hail Mary, because they said if anybody needs help getting to this program, let me know. So I ended up sending that person a message. And this is where it gets crazy. She responded. And I called her and I told her what my story was as best as I could remember and conjure up. And, she gave me a little bit of history about herself. And she said, listen, I'll assist you in getting to Gloucester, but if you decide to pick up a habit while you're out here, then that's on you. I said, okay. So I convinced somebody else in California to buy me a plane ticket. Ended up selling my car for like $500 to pay for a part of it. And then I just got on a plane with like a backpack that had a big book, a pair of socks, and I think that's it. I think I just came out with the clothes that were on my back. And it was like a leap of faith. Right?
I'll say.
So I got out here. She picked me up at the airport, drove me to Gloucester from Logan. Ended up staying in the hospital at Addison Gilbert for like 16 hours. And that was like crazy. I went to Cab Danvers, and that was more of the same. It reminded me just as like the other county detox back home. So I knew it too.
Except you flew 3,000 miles.
Yeah. Well, that was another thing. People were like, you did what? What? Why? And you came here? Why? I said, I don't know. I'm desperate. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So I ended up, and this is where it kind of gets a little bit crazy, right? Because I ended up going through detox out here. I had a job back in California. I was a surveyor. Again, another job I wildly underqualified for, but somehow convinced somebody to hire me. So I was a surveyor, and I had Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance. Now, I stopped showing up to work because that's what I did, or, I just don't show up. But for some reason, I still had insurance because it hadn't lapsed, like, from when I left. And so I ended up calling insurance again because I couldn't get into any treatment out here because I wasn't a Massachusetts resident. Therefore, the insurance that I did have was out of network. So I had to go back to California.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up calling my dad from Danvers, and I hadn't spoke to him in probably 6 months after he basically told me, no, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. Get out. Call me when you're a year sober. Okay, I'll show you. So, obviously I, drank the poison and expected him to feel pain. So yeah, I called him and he was, he was like, what? You're where? Well, okay. And, being the good dad that he is, he bought me a plane ticket back without many questions asked. So I ended up coming back to California. I had like one night before I could get into this other treatment center. So obviously I got high the whole night. I ended up calling somebody that I used to, hang out and get high with, and I told him what was going on. And I overdrew my bank account to get cash. And I was like, listen, I'm in Portland because I had a connecting flight. I was like, I'm in Portland right now. I'm getting sick because they gave me
Oregon?
Portland, Oregon, because they gave me methadone in Danvers. And I'm like, I'm getting really sick, and I don't want to deal with it. I'm not going into treatment sick. I'm not doing it. So he's like, all right, I'll pick you up. And I was like, get this, and this. I'm like, he's like, okay, fine. I was like, and I told him how much I had. So I stepped off the plane in San Jose, and I was picked up, and I got high like right there as we're pulling out of the airport, which is crazy. And it just goes to show like how much of a hold this had on me.
Dude, I have a friend who used to talk about going down the street to get a bag 2 blocks and he couldn't even wait. He'd stop in at a bar and cook it up with toilet water.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and then bang a vein.
Yeah. So,
like 3 minutes away from his house.
yeah, I get it. So, went into treatment. It was another 30-day treatment program. You know, we did a lot of yoga. We did acupuncture, and there was some great ideas. But
This is in California.
this was in California. It was in the hills of Santa Cruz. It was in the mountains, and it was
Yoga, acupuncture at the time. That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful establishment. We did a rock climb. You know, fantastic. But it didn't really. I needed more than that, right? And so the chief of police was basically contacting me because since I was the first person to go through this crazy idea of a program, all this national attention and press was happening, and they wanted to talk to me, but I was pushing them off because I'm like, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to get high. So 2 weeks went by after treatment. It was the end of July 2015. I'll never forget this. And you know, he's basically got high obviously the day I left. And he basically was like, "Listen, I don't care where you are, what you're doing. Just call me. Let me know you're okay." So I did, and you know, the nonprofit, you know, assisted me to get back out here, and I went to this like really hard-lined AA. It's called a retreat, spiritual retreat, because there was no medication, there was nothing. It was, you know, hardline. You know, the problem is you. You know, I don't care about your feelings. We care about sobriety here. And at the time, that's what I needed. But you know, granted, I see the harm that does to people.
Some.
And so I went through that, and it was crazy. Like I ended up getting through that. I went to a sober home in Wakefield. Ended up getting a job my first winter here, cleaning sewers. And it was good money. I mean, it was like $45 an hour.
Oh yeah, it's got to be good money.
But I don't know. My soul was being crushed more than it does today.
My cousin works for the New York Sewer Department, and they have T-shirts that says it may be shit to you, but it's our bread and butter.
Absolutely. So yeah, I cleaned sewers all winter and ended up quitting. And then a buddy of mine who works at another agency in Boston was telling me about this type of work. So I got on and I started doing that, and found some purpose. You know, and really, it's been.
How long have you been doing this?
3 years now. It'll be 3 years in March.
It's a recovery coach.
Yeah, it'll be 3 years in March.
Wow.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm telling on myself, but I started doing this at about 9 months sober. Right? Because everyone, 2 years, you got to have 2 years, which I never really agreed with. But yeah, it started at 9 months. And, you know, I got to a point where I was emotionally mature enough to do it, stable enough, which is cool. So
I have different thoughts on that, but having known you for a little while, but I don't think
keeping yourself.
I don't think any of us are emotionally stable or mature enough.
I would say I am compared to where I was. Absolutely.
I get it.
But yeah, overall,
I jest.
I know. So it's been about 3 years now, and you know, I'd be lying if I said that it was all good. It's significantly better. But
life or the gig?
Life.
Yeah.
Life is much better. Are you kidding me?
Well, I didn't know if you were talking about the job or if you were talking about just life in general.
Yeah, life in general. I mean, yeah, the job's what it is, right? Like where it is right now. Where we work is pretty good. I've worked at some terrible places. I've worked at some okay places. I would say this is in the better of. Yeah,
I think I think we're fortunate. I think we're actually not just compared to other coaching jobs, but to other. I mean, I'm 20 years older than you.
Yep.
Almost like about 19 years older than you, and I've had a few jobs, and I can tell you this is probably one of the better ones I've had. You know, I mean, as we know, the industry doesn't, you know, pay
Right.
extremely well, but I think that we're in a pretty good situation here. So what I find interesting about you and I, despite having grown up and lived in completely different parts of the country and in completely different eras, there are a lot of similarities, which I find interesting.
Absolutely.
I mean, my dad had one of the first 8086s, IBM 8086 PC.
Yeah.
And had the same talk with me about this is the future. We're talking double discs, and I think a hard drive that wasn't more than maybe 32 megs.
Is it the size of this room?
It was pretty big. It was the size of a microwave. And the TV and small classroom when I first started. I actually went to a bilingual school when I first moved to the States.
Oh, wow.
Because I still do speak fluent French, but and then had a small junior high, and then went to a larger high school with just thousands and thousands and thousands of kids, and the gray out of the past, and I don't remember a lot about my childhood, and apparently you don't really either. But you had a relatively good one.
I did have a good one, and
right, but I don't have vivid memories.
It's weird. Like I have weird memories. Like the other day, I don't know if they're bleed throughs or they're flashbacks. I don't know what it is, but there's a few of them that I have, and I vividly remember what happened. One of them is like the first bike crash that I had. I smashed my head, and thank God I was wearing a helmet because I probably, something else, I could be dead. Yeah, like just that motion of falling. I always remember that, and then I remember the dent in the helmet. And then the other one is being up in my grandparents' cabin near Yosemite, and like I remember specifically sitting on the dock, and it was overlooking a lake, and just sitting there and just remembering how peaceful it was. It's crazy. Like those are the two big ones, and every once in a while I have flashes of it, but for the most part, like that childhood, I don't really remember it, and maybe it's because I've blocked it out. I don't know why, and I haven't really had, well, maybe this, I don't know. I haven't really had any brain trauma. Like I've been hit a bunch of times in the head. That I know of. Like I've been concussed.
I think there's some evidence to the contrary, but
I've had people smash things over my head, but I don't know.
So what? So you've been in recovery now for how long?
This last time or in total?
Well, this last time.
This last time it'll be 4 years in August. So
and what does that mean to you? I mean, what does recovery and sobriety mean to you?
So recovery and sobriety mean that I am just like everybody else that gets up in the morning, puts their pants on, pays taxes, like what normal people do, go to work, and just be a part of society. That's it. It's not all about me anymore. Thank God. I'm able to just show up, just be a part of things that historically I would just take from. And I'm not taking as much. I'm actually giving something back. So this idea of giving back rather than taking is pretty central to what my recovery looks like. And then, the future isn't like this terrifying doom. Right? Like I actually have an opportunity to do things that I probably wouldn't have the same opportunity if I was still deciding to get high. Right? Because for me, like addiction, and there's some doctors that talk about this, and specifically Dr. Gabor Mate. He talks about the lack of connection with other people is the main cause of addiction, right? Like isolation. And I could relate to that because I did a lot of isolating.
Yeah, I think communication is key to a lot of this. So is there anything in particular that you have to do? I'm going to use this for lack of a better term, but to maintain your recovery, your sobriety?
Yeah, there are a few things. First of all is knowing that my presence is more useful than my opinion most of the time. So shutting the fuck up. And
So I guess I was more, I don't know what I was asking you. I think I was more, trying to figure out if there's anything in particular. Like, do you feel that you have to do more than you said, for example, you're a productive member of society. I agree with that. And you live your life like a normal human being, blah, blah, blah. But do you feel that because of your addiction, because of your whatever, however you identify, that you have to do more than, let's say, the average person to kind of maintain a quote unquote normal productive life?
That's a good question. I've never actually contemplated that part of it.
Can I help you out?
Well, so I'm trying not to give the answer that everybody thinks I'm going to give. Like, I go to meetings and blah,
right.
blah, 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 blah. Because the fact of the matter is I really don't.
Right.
Like, I do, but I'm not, like, actively participating because I did that before. Like,
which is another thing you and I have in common. And that's kind of where I was getting at is do we as,
go ahead.
And another word that I can't stand, do we as recoveries, I know people in recovery, do we have to do extra or something special or whatever? And I don't know. Right. So I go to meetings. I don't participate in them. I've never done the steps. I didn't underline and highlight things in the big book. And okay. I don't agree with, if someone asks you to chair, you have to, because that's, no. Part of my recovery is the ability to say no today. And if I'm uncomfortable, I'm not going to make myself uncomfortable just to please you, right? So if someone asks me to chair in a meeting and I feel like it, I'll do it. And if they want to say, well, when the hand of AA reaches out, you have to, no, absolutely not. So, but as far as doing more, I think I've done more than I knew was available to me before I started drinking, right? Because for me, it was alcohol. And the stuff that I'm doing now with meditation and spirituality and talking about how I think and feel, yep. And being a basic human and no longer having that impending doom and unfounded, ungrounded fear and things like that, and knowing what that is today, right? I wonder sometimes had I known that before I picked up, if I would have picked up, or if that was just pretty much my destiny to begin with.
Right.
Right?
I would say for me, it's remaining curious.
That's a very good.
And remaining willing to educate myself and not get into thinking that whatever ideology I subscribe to is enough, because life isn't black and white.
And keeping an open mind.
Yeah, certainly keeping an open mind, but that was because you said you didn't do the steps. I've done the steps multiple times, like different ways, but the core thing that I learned from my process in the steps was discarding my belief system of what I think and feel I should be, discarding my thoughts about what society thinks I should be, and then realizing that in the big scheme of things, I'm but an ant just walking around, right? Like, there's 7 billion other people on this planet. Most of them don't care about me. And realizing that is something that I needed, right? So I've gone through the process. I've righted most of the wrongs that I could right. But that's just the beginning, right? I believe that process is kindergarten, and it introduces you to a whole wide range of belief systems and philosophies that, if you start getting curious and you start reading, you kind of see that Bill and Bob, well, mostly Bill, cherry picked a lot of this stuff, right? And then
the Oxford group, and all kinds of things.
All kinds of things.
Yeah, all kinds of things. I mean, you and I have talked about this before. This stuff isn't new. It's been around for 3,000 years, right? I mean, the first time I looked at the steps and the traditions in AA, my first thought was like, wow, a lot of that sounds kind of Buddhist, right? Because that's what I was into at the time. So yeah. So listen, we're almost, you actually almost did an hour, which,
wow.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
Which I think is great, and
just scratch the surface too.
And FYI to the people listening, there were a couple interruptions. Some people walked in on us and started making some noise. So
how dare they?
I'm gonna try to edit some of that out, and if I don't, just want to give you all a heads up as to why that noise was there. So Steve, let me. I got a couple questions I'd like to ask you before we wrap this up. Is one of there any particular thoughts or wisdom you think you'd like to impart? Well, let me ask it in another way.
Is that a question?
Let me ask it in another way.
Okay.
Is there anything you wish I'd asked you that I didn't?
Yeah. Next time, ask some of the thoughts. Not some of the thoughts, but some of the feelings that people experience. Because I'm sure you're going to do this again. Or we'll do this again. So ask them if they can remember in the moment or a theme or something that their addiction, right? Like what were the feelings associated with that? Because I feel like a lot of the time that's not talked about. And the mental health aspect of addiction is not talked about.
I think a lot of times it's hard to talk about because I did have that question actually was, what was your moment? What was your moment? What were your feelings at the time?
Should have asked it.
Well, I'm asking it now.
So and it was basically my moment, what was my moment?
You came up with the question, so.
So
what was the question? It was what were your feelings at the time?
I mean, it's just constant desperation and fear and, moment to moment living and there's no way to live. It was just constant anxiety, terror, and bewilderment, and oh shit. Yeah,
and the thing is too is that I think that gets asked a lot actually, and I think it gets asked a lot in therapy and stuff like that. So how did that make you feel? So how did you feel?
Ask it like that.
Well, but the thing is, it's a very difficult thing. I think to put your finger on it. I think it takes a while to kind of figure out what that was. Okay. Right. I've had and let me see if you agree with this, with me on this is I think a lot of people who are newly sober and are trying to figure out what's going on, this is new to them. Mm-hmm. The emotional part is new to them and the feelings are new to them. And sometimes you're feeling something and you mislabel that feeling. So, for example, a lot of us, those people, tend to exhibit a lot of anger, right? There's an era of anger in sobriety, and I would venture to posit that it's not so much anger as fear, mm-hmm. and that it manifests itself as anger because a lot of times you don't know what else to do but to be angry when you're in that situation because you're certainly not going to admit that you're feared. So clinicians and stuff get very confused by that because I'll walk in and I'll say, well, I got a lot of anger. Well, what are you angry about? And then I can come up with 1,000 different reasons why I'm angry, but none of them are accurate, right? When actually what it is so I think asking someone, and I don't disagree with you, but I just, how did you feel during that, or how did that make you feel? I don't think is, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to get at, which is pretty much the story of my life.
So time to shut up.
And then I'll do that. Okay. So that is episode 3.
Yeah. Thank you to everybody that's listening.
And thank you for those of you who subscribed and who have listened and the comments we've gotten. It's been really great. This
good
has been,
and bad comments are appreciated.
Yeah, this has been a really good experience for both of us. This is not my first go around at a podcast, and
it is mine.
And this one is is, for those of you who are listening, is doing extremely well. And we will be needing your input at some point, because we are going to be submitting the podcast to iTunes. We've got a lot of requests for that too, so that people can listen to it and subscribe. And we're going to need stars and ratings and comments, and we're going to try to get ourselves up.
Are you
and
whoring for
I
stars?
am pimping us. I am pimping us out.
Man.
Well, here's the thing, right? The more we get, the more of a chance we get to get on the new and noteworthy on the Apple Podcast site. And
Show that ass.
and right now we're on Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, and soon to be on Stitcher and iTunes.
Okay.
So
I like
this
it.
is Richard Zombeck along with Steve Lesnikoski, and we are Buds with Suds signing off, and we'll see you in the next show.